Welcome to the introduction of the Corpro pricing system. It's fast and easy. It'll give us consistent pricing no matter who is using it, and it thinks like a sign person. The program is extremely flexible. The broad view of the system is just this simple. You input information, and out comes a price. It also includes some very useful tools. The program runs as a spreadsheet. It's available to anyone, anywhere, anytime through Google Sheets, but it runs like any spreadsheet. And the pricing program is really a series of sheets, and they're placed in a logical order. Although it may seem intimidating at first, look at the tabs along the bottom of the program and think in groups. The first group is an input group. The first 5 sheets are in this group. The next 2 are output. Then your tools and background sheets you don't even need to worry about. That's where the program does its thinking, its math. These are the groups of sheets, and generally you think from left to right. Let me go over them again. In the input group, you have welcome, decorations, add-ons, labor, and vended. The welcome sheet is where you put in the basic information. Decoration is just that. It's where you tell the system about large format imaging and various vinyls, lamination, and those issues. Almost every sign has add-ons. This covers everything from grommets, painting, to permits. Next is fabrication labor and vended parts. The second group is output, meaning you can look at the price, and by the way, it's very detailed. And fabrication. Anyone involved in designing or fabricating the sign can come here and get all the information they need. The third group is every tool you need to make the program work. It reduces repetitive tasks. The calculator helps you figure things out when need be, and those factor tables are the program's secret sauce. Finally, the background group, you don't have to worry about it. Never touch or alter anything in the last 3 tabs. When you open the system as a Google Sheet, you can't put any information into it. It's locked. This safeguards the template. To begin, go under File, copy the sheet, rename it, number it, and then you can begin using it. Quick note on numbering. You may be used to giving a job a number once it begins production. The new system gives the job a number when you quote it. This allows a customer to reject the quote and then come back a few weeks later and do business with us. The quote will still be there. Let's say a guy wants to letter his truck, get a panel post sign, and then put his logo behind the secretary. Sure, those are 3 jobs, but they're one project. When you number a project, start the number with P. So when you're even giving a quote, get a job number. And now it's time for a file. You don't just get a number, you start a file. A quote is usually the first document, so it's time to go to the shared drive and open a new client file right away to store it. The shared drive is a place where everybody can go to get every document. It's also a place where all the files are stored, but I'm not going to get into that here. Basically, though, it's easy to make a new file. Inside the client directory is a master file. Copy and paste the master file into the client folder and then rename it. The name would look like this. The P indicates that there's more than one job in the file, so it's a project. Space, hyphen, space, and the name of the company. This number is used in everything, and it's going to be a key factor in the upcoming project management system. Let's get to work on tab 1. It's called Welcome, just basic information such as the date, deadline, customer, name of the project, little descriptions such as truck lettering, window, or whatever. And over here, 3 key factors. Don't worry about this now. I'll come back to it. There's a reason, though. It's at the very top of the first tab. Super important. Let's go to the second section here. You'll notice that labor is colored. This color means input. It's a variable for a reason. We'll get back to this. When you see this color means drop down. A table charge is a $15 charge per job. And this means that you can pay for self-healing plastic on the table, Stabilos, masking tape, rags, alcohol, application fluids, all the stuff you use in fabrication. Now let's say the project is made up of 3 jobs. On the second and third jobs, you can go like this. You can go yes, waive the table charge. So the customer only pays it once per project. Meanwhile, the default is no. Move to the next section where it's talking about some of the most basic aspects of the sign. This big red section here with the yellow you can't miss because you simply must give the job a number. This is where you put that in. And how wide, how tall is the sign, how many sides are going to be lettered, and how many. At the bottom of the welcome page is the substrate. There's a drop down here with all the common substrates. The default is other. If it's other, you can type in the name of something else and price it. I'll tell you how to price it later. So you can cover every type of substrate. You just type it in if it's not in the drop down. Now, whenever you see blue, that's an override. We'll talk about that later. And it says here, go to the next sheet to enter the information used to price the sign's decorations. So let's do that. Decoration inputs. There are 2 types of decorations handled here: large format imaging and vinyl. You can put in 4 different kinds of vinyl. Let's go over the factors. Again, we have put in the drop down the most common vinyl used for large format imaging, right there. If it's not here, type it in. Let's say you're going to use a very unusual vinyl for a wrap that's not in the drop down. You type it in here, and you'd also change the price per square foot. Here you have lamination. It's defaulted to none, but it could be calendared or cast. And when you're talking about applying something, you can either supply it only, put it on with a lamination machine onto the substrate, or you can apply it by hand. If you're applying it by machine, of course, there's no transfer tape, but sometimes with large format imaging pieces, you want transfer tape. Put it in. Here's an interesting thing here, the percent coverage. Sometimes the large format imaging is just a crest up in the corner or a graphic here that's about maybe 20% of the job. So type that in. 20% of the substrate is covered with a large format image. It's a great way to isolate the actual usage of that material. Now, when you move on to the vinyls, they're the exact same as the large format imaging, only they don't have the option of lamination, but they do have color. You can either put in the code of the vinyl or just put in dark blue. But again, you have the drop down of the different types of common vinyl. If it's not available, you can put the type of vinyl you're using. You can put the price per square foot. Again, we'll come back to that. How you're going to apply it, machine or by hand. And you're going to be putting in whether or not there's transfer tape. And again, percent coverage. Say the vinyl that you're using here is only half the sign. Well, then put in 50%. Again, there is an override factor. We'll get back to that. So far, we've covered the basic information, the substrate, the decoration, but rarely is a sign that simple. There's usually add-ons. What do I mean by that? I'm going to zoom out here a little bit so you can see it better. This is the add-on page. I'll just go through it. It's all self-explanatory. The red, whenever you see red, that's an output. This just keeps track of the transfer tape that's being used. Next, the number of holes, you can describe them. The number of sides to paint. This is a real handy tool. You can use the drop down. Say it's 2 sides. You put in the type of paint, the color. You could even use the code here. How many coats? And are you going to use a primer? All you do is put that information in. The system prices it automatically. There are 2 items here for banners, grommets and hemming. it covers all of the issues, how far between the grommets. Over here you see whether or not you put the grommets on the top or the sides or both. And sometimes people want the grommets just on the corners. Hemming, same thing. Tape or stitch, top or sides or both, and any instructions you may wish to give. Corners, sometimes you round a corner. Magnets you always do, pretty much. You say how many corners, instructions, and the program will price for that to be done. Next, decals, stickers, here we go. Contour cuts. When you put the vinyl back in the cutter to cut the shape of a sticker, this is where you tell it to charge for that. Over here you have a very important piece of information. If the perimeter is less than 12 inches, it's small. If it's more than 12 inches, it's large. So you put that in here, small or large or none. Just for a minute, let me go back to the welcome page with the size. Let's say this particular sticker is 4 inches by 1 inch, and you're going to make 1,000 of them. That's how you do it. You just put it in like that. And on the add-on page, you would go, that's a small, and forget it. That's it. That's all you need to put in. It'll price it based on that. We're still on the add-on page. This is a cool, flexible feature. I call them the notepads. Here are two great notepads. The first one's for fasteners, and the second one is for assorted costs. You simply put the item in here. It could be greatly detailed, or you could just say assorted fasteners, put in a price here, and it's that simple. Now, at the beginning of the program, I said this is a very flexible system, and this is something that adds to your flexibility. It's just basically a notepad here for assorted costs that you may not see coming, that are very unusual. We're in a business where you're always getting surprises, and you can put those things here. Describe it, what you're going to charge for it, and down here, it'll just total it up. These are straight shooting notepads. If you've ever priced a sign before, you're used to doodling prices down and figuring stuff out and keeping track of it. Well, that's what these notepads are for. This is how we keep track of the fasteners and things we don't see coming. Now let's go to the bottom of the add-on page. On the left-hand side, it says mileage and associated costs. Later on in the video, I'm going to say more about mileage. Let's just simply say that right here is where you simply type in how far the job is away from the shop. Next, you input how many trips a car is going to make there and how many trips the trucks are going to make there. Now, the next two things I'm going to show you are great for someone pricing a big boom truck installation job. Quite simply, how many hours of the boom trucks are going to be there? Total hours. 2 trucks, 4 hours. Put in 8 hours for boom trucks. And over to the right, this is the notepad for installation-related labor. It has another added level of control. You can describe what you're doing, the rate for that, and how long it's going to take you. And this is kind of cool. Instead of writing in 1.5 hours, you'd go 1 hour and 30 minutes. It's easier that way because that's generally how people think. Now back over to the left-hand side, there's just a couple of things down here. If you have to call before you dig, just go, yeah. We'll charge for that. Do you have to acquire a permit? Yeah. And how much is a permit going to cost? Well, I leave that open as an input because every town is different. Sometimes every job is different. And you just plug that in there. And now, while we're talking about acquiring a permit, don't forget to charge for the sketches required for the permit. And where do you do that? The next tab. Labor. Right here. The design labor is done here. Now, you may have noticed that I have a lot of inputs. It's better to have too many than too few. So if you're going to be putting in sketch for permit and say it's going to be an hour and a half's work, sometimes they're pretty complex. You just put it in there. and you forget it. It is going to price itself. That's all you need to do. This is all self-explanatory. The only thing that might be a little bit different here is if you back up the truck here a little bit and go to the add-on page, you have assorted costs. Sometimes you have a flat fee for a logo. Say it's $500. You put it in here. I think that's the best way to handle this. I usually have a flat fee for that. And while we're here, I forgot to mention, this is a great place to put in things like lamps or ballasts, or you have to hire an electrician. Unforeseen costs. You can just throw them up here. Price them. It keeps track of it. But let's get back to labor. We were talking about design costs. But what are these three things? Labor A, B, and C? A labor is skilled labor in fabrication. B is semi-skilled labor. C is labor such as digging a hole or peeling vinyl, washing a screen, stuff like that. This gives you very finely tuned power over how you're pricing the fabrication of the sign. Now let's move on to vended. Again, lots of inputs, but notice up here in the corner, the vended factor. We're going to get back to this in a minute. This is very straightforward. You don't need to price anything here. You simply put in the name of the item, such as cement pad. The vendor is ABC Masonry. The description, you just put in a size, sign pad. You just type that in here, whatever it is. And let's say it's $1,100. You'll notice that the cost here is $1,100. And the reason for that is because up here we haven't put the factor in yet. We're going to come back to that. Meanwhile, let's jump to the fun part. The output, the next tab. It's simply called price. For the moment, let's just ignore all these numbers and kind of look and see what's really happening here. On the price page, you have the output, that's column 1. This is what the program tells you the price should be. But the second column allows you to override any price. For example, we have one price here, labor for design. Remember we were talking about that? It came out to $163.50. But let's say we want to drop that down to an even $150. Look what happens right here. The price overrides to $150 because this is the column, this blue column is what's subtotaled right here. And below it, you can apply a discount. You just type in 5% discount and you get a 5% discount. Down the description column, you have a list of everything going on. You have the substrate, large format imaging, it's all there. The vinyl, the labor, all of these add-ons, the fasteners, the mileage, the Julie, the permitting, the table charge, it's all there. Look at this number here, $15. If we go back to the welcome screen and say we're going to waive the table charge, look what happens. On the price, it goes to 0. Now, over on this side, you get the price per unit. So to review, the first column is the output from the program. The second column is where you can override any price. And all of the final prices show up here. They're subtotaled down here. You can give a discount. And the grand total that you quote the customer is right here. The description of everything is broken down. And you can look over here for the price per unit. This override column gives you maximum power to basically shape the price any way you want. Let's move to the next tab. It's really cool. I think it's the best tab, although it's kind of ugly, especially when there's not a whole lot of information in it. But this is the information that the fabricators and the artist require. You've got the basic information. It tells you here that there is a vendor. See the vendor tab for details. So you go here and say, oh, this guy's going to put a cement pad in. Right on. You have the size of the sign, how many sides, the quantity, all the vinyl information, whether it's laminated, how it's going to be applied, whether there's transfer tape. Down here, all the add-on information, the description, it's all here. The fabrication tab is very powerful. And when all the information is in for the substrate and the decoration and the add-ons, this populates and looks way more informative than it does right now. At this point of the presentation, there are a couple of questions that have not been answered. Let's get to it. I said at the beginning, there's this on the front page, and we'll get back to it. I also talked about these factors here, the blue ones, and I said we'll talk about those later. Well, it's time to get to it now, and that is the factor table. Take a deep breath. It's not that hard. It's easy peasy once I describe it to you. And really all you need to worry about is this top table. Once you understand how it works, you will understand how these work. Now let's go to the master table up here. I think the best way to describe this is with an example. There are two signs. They're both made out of Alumilite, and they're both decorated with large format imaging, and they're both laminated. The difference is the first customer is a one-time customer. He wants a sign for his driveway that says no trespassing, 2 feet by 2 feet. The other one is a customer like Swedes, and they want a sign that's 6 feet tall by 20 feet. These two jobs are different for obvious reasons, the size and the customer. And that's exactly what this table addresses. Across the top, you have the size of the sign, and down the side, you have the type of customer. Let's address size first. I break it down as one-offs, 1 foot to 31 feet, small, 32 to 58, medium, 59 to 95, large, 96 to 299, and what I call a project, anything over 300 square feet. Now this last column, it can use a bit of discretion. Let's say the job has a lot of vended products, dimensional letters, foam base, cement pad. It almost always automatically goes to this column. Use your judgment. But how do you determine the size? At the top you see this red bar. It says size. Right now there is no size because we haven't filled it in. Let's go to the front page. And back to the basics. We're going to make this sign 10 feet by 2. And go back to the factor tables. It's 20 square feet. Now you would think if it was double-sided that it would be 40, but that's not the case. When we go to a double-sided, it actually goes to 30. The reason for that is when we're calculating size at this stage, the second side counts for half. If you're wondering right now if we use the same formula for vinyl, no. The vinyl is calculated foot for foot that is actually used. Because this number is 30, we automatically use this column. If we go back to the welcome page and we say he wants to buy 2 of these signs, then it's 60. And that means we go to this column. The next factor is the type of customer. A transient customer is someone who's just passing through, a one-time customer. Like the guy who wants a sign at the end of his driveway, or the circus is coming through town. The second type of customer is called commercial. This covers most businesses. Joe's Plumbing, who has a truck or two, he has a simple 4x8 sign out in front of his building. He's quoted on this column. But let's say it's not Joe's Plumbing. Let's say it's someone like Pearson. A big company, dozens of trucks. We really want to get their business. We move to the competitive. That's this row. You've heard the saying, I'll sharpen my pencil, give you a better price. Well, this is where you go to sharpen your pencil. The next type is heavy user. Customers that use our service a lot. And finally, the platinum. These are our very best rates. And before you hand out a platinum status, ask Bob. Meanwhile, don't worry about what all of these numbers mean. Without boring you, they are derivatives of profit margins, and they're based on the Rockford market. And the two tables below work exactly like this one. It's not enough that there's just one table. These other two tables are very important. They're special factors, and it's about being competitive. Use these factors when you're making Corplast signs, especially large quantities. This is for Corplast signs only, and they have to be machine applied. If the vinyl or digital imaging is applied by hand, then just use the regular factor. So where do you put in this special factor? You'll see a place for it here on the decoration page. When you put in this special factor, it overrides the main factor, and it automatically uses the competitive lower price. You'll notice that these numbers are much lower. They're more competitive. This discount table, this is the really very competitive numbers. Basically, this number allows for a super low price for yard signs, real estate signs. These are the two tables you use when you want to get into that game. Now, how do you override prices? Let's go back to the welcome screen and the decoration screen. Right here, if you're pricing for Corplast, you put the factor from that table right here, and it overrides the master factor. By the way, I forgot to mention, once you decide which factor you're going to use, say you're going to use this factor, you take this number and you type it in here. So the number we chose is 4.634. 4.634. This is the master factor. Everything that happens in the system bounces off that number. It takes into account the size of the job and the type of customer. It's calculated to be competitive. But when you're doing a Corplast sign for yard signs or for real estate and you really want to compete, you can override this number by simply typing the number here. And where do you get that number? From the Corplast table. Corresponding number. It's, we'll pretend it's small. And what is this, competitive? Okay, there we go. So it's this number, 2.535. You would go here, 2.535. For the substrate, it will override the price if you were to choose Corplast. Let's get Corplast here. There you go. Also, you have to make sure this is blank. Otherwise, it'll price this price instead of the Corplast. Whenever you put a price in here, it overrides everything, irrespective of what you put in the drop-down. So let me say that again so I'm clear. The program prices based on what you choose unless you override this price. Now let's go over to the decoration page. You can override the price of the vinyl. Don't forget the rules though. You can only be using calendared vinyl. This does not work for cast. And you have to be doing this by, machine. As soon as you go to a hand application, you are not allowed to use the override factor. So keep that in mind. Unless you override the price of the vinyl right here, the program will use the master factor every time. Again, the reason you would override is so you can do the yard signs and the real estate signs and be competitive. So back to the factor tables. At the bottom, we have the vendor tables. Remember the cement pad? $1,100. Here's the factor right here, 1.59. Go back to the vendor and type that in here, 1.59. Watch this. The price just changed to $28.49. But let's say there are some other vended items, dimensional letters, a foam base. And go back to the factor tables and see, let's pretend it comes out to $4,800, all told. All the vendors are $4,800 told. Use this factor, 1.46. If you go back to the vendor and go 1.46, you'll see this goes from $28.49 to $27.06. That's just for the cement pad. This is an example of how the vendor factor affects the final cost. And by the way, if there's shipping, say they bring a cabinet and it's $200 shipping, just type $200 in there. And you will charge $230. I'll show you why later. Now there's one more thing to show you on the factor tables, and that is here, the labor. If you go back to the labor tab, you notice how you just put in the design labor, labor A, B, and C. You just put the time in and forget about it. Well, all the pricing is being done in the background, and this factor bears down on the final cost of labor in the sign. If you recall, on the front page, we had labor right here. And I said we'd get back to that. It's yellow, so we can use it as an input. Let's say the customer is a transient. Change it to 115%. Let's say he's a premium. It's 86%. So you'd go to the welcome page and you would change this to 86%. What does that mean? Well, go to the pricing page and look for labor for design. I'm going to turn this to 0 so we have the actual price. It's $140.61. But if we change it to 100%, the price becomes $163.50. To put it simply, the labor rate is affected by the type of customer you're dealing with. The 100% rate here is for your average person, the commercial rate. If you want to be a little more competitive, we shave a bit off. A heavy user gets a little more off, and a platinum gets a little more off. In fact, quite a bit more off. Simply put, once you decide which type of customer you're dealing with, you go to the welcome page and you type it in right here. Let's move past the factor tables and go to this. This is really, I'm going to zoom in on this. This is a management tab. You should never go in here and you should never touch anything in here. But this is what's going on. The manager sets all of these prices. You can change anything, and when you do, the program will calculate prices differently. The table charges here, you can change that to whatever you want. The design rate, labor rates A, B, and C. All the substrates right here. I'm going to show you in a minute how these are calculated. The vinyl types. This is a waste factor. When you're figuring out these prices here for your substrates and your vinyl types, it calculates a certain amount of wastage, and that number is 20%. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's keep going. Shipping factor. This is a multiplier that adds a little bit to shipping costs. It's only 15%. Ditto for transfer tape. Now the add-ons have their controls here. I'm not going to bore you with this. This is just a bunch of numbers. But your mileage for vehicles, mileage for trucks, the radius of the market. Okay, this number here is important. I told you I would talk a bit more about the market. What this does is it draws a 20-mile circle around the shop. And it says we don't charge for mileage within that circle. It's our trading area. But once you go out that trading area, the pricing program begins to charge for those miles. Next is machine cost per action. Every time you touch a machine, it's a $15 charge. Now you might be wondering, does size affect this? Absolutely. This only covers the first 32 square feet. So if you're cutting a huge job or you're laminating a huge job, every time you use a machine, the first 32 square feet are $15. And every 32-foot section after that is $15 times 40%, which I think is $6. Machine costs are very important. It takes time to set up a machine. So let's move on to the price of calendared and cast vinyl, hourly truck rate. The price to Julie something, call before you dig. It costs $30 to call them up and set that up. And to procure a permit, $100. Now let me show you something really cool. Next tab, calculators. I told you we had a way to figure out how to price something. Remember back here? For example, let's Corplast. It's 35 cents. How did I get to that number? How do I figure out that PVC is this much or polycarb is... how do I know? Go to the calculator. Let's pretend we're going to buy a roll of something for $225. It's 4.5 feet by 150. You charge 42 cents per square foot. And remember, this number takes into consideration this number, the waste factor. You see, you don't have to scratch your head figuring that out. This does it automatically. The calculator also helps you figure out the retail price of an item. Now, this can be a tricky subject. For an example, let's think of some nice standoffs. We buy them for $35. They're shipped for $15. Why would the MSRP be $214.76, which is roughly 79% profit, which, by the way, is normal for the sign industry? The factor that's used, let's go back to the welcome page, is this one right here. Now let's go back. And let's say we're not talking about standoffs. It's something more common. There's no shipping. And let's say your judgment says, for this item, I just want to mark it up 30%. Notice here in the light gray, it says here, 30% markup, $45.50. And it says add shipping as a pass-through. A pass-through means you don't add anything to it. So if you add $10 shipping, it just goes $55.50. Then you would take that number, go to the add-ons, roll down, let me zoom out here a little bit, and you may put that in as an assorted cost or a notepad, because sometimes you run into an item and you don't know how to price it, and this calculator can help you. And finally, the calculator has square footage. So if something is 24 inches by 120, there's one of them, there's 20 square feet. This calculator can help you get your arms around the size of a job very quickly. The size of a job is a key factor. Look at this van. On both sides, you have blocked out areas, plus one on the back. The elementary math shows that there are 46.2 square feet in this job. But let's say this job is part of a project. This customer wants to letter the windows on the front of the store and put the logo behind the secretary. When calculating the size of this project, add up all of the sizes. So if the customer buys the entire project at once, she can save a lot because of the rate based on the accumulated square footage. It's handy when the job doesn't have a substrate, such as a vehicle. You can use this number when you go to the factor tables. Instead of using this number, you can use that number. That's it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Thanks.